Hi everyone, and welcome back to Noonchi, where I do a deep dive into some of your favorite K-dramas from a mental health perspective. I want to talk about regret and remorse. I recently was watching simultaneously, I never do that, but I felt like doing it this time around, Sisyphus the Myth and Vincenzo. Watching them back to back, and guess what they both talked about, these episodes. Episode 3 of Vincenzo and episode 4 of Sisyphus the Myth talked about regret, hue, the Korean term. I realized regret and remorse, both emotions, are threaded consistently in stories of people I work with, clients that come see me because of regret and the remorse they feel. Let me first define it. Regret. An emotion of sadness, disappointment, repentance of something you may have experienced, something you may have said, done in the past that you regret, right? Or something that may have been said or done to you, regret. Remorse, deeper sense of regret, a distressful emotion of sadness. And disappointment. I want to say that sometimes it comes out as shameful, guilty. Regret can really be overpowering, and then you feel this sense of remorse because you can't do anything about it. Episode 3 of Vincenzo, Song Joong-ki's character says something so cool to the female protagonist, the feisty, spicy attorney. She had just gotten into a fight with her dad about something that happened in the past surrounding her mom. You don't really know what at this point, but she was angry. Then she walks off. Song Joong-ki's character says to her a couple scenes later, "Hey, you acted like a brat, by the way, instead of this hotshot attorney." She's like, "Excuse me?" He says, children's criticisms to their parents end up being regrets. Take a pause. I was like, wow, and reverse that. Parents' criticism to their kids or criticisms of their kids can turn into regrets. I see it both sides, especially among Asian Americans where we're tougher on each other, right? Things can be harsh. There's anger and explosive emotions sometimes, and you say things and you had these high expectations. I do see a lot of regret, but regret can happen in any narrative. Remorse really is that distressful emotion where you can't overcome that. Episode 4 of Sisyphus. Sisyphus is all about time travel, quantum leaping, time, and it's kind of confusing, but it's exciting, interesting. She says that people come back from the future to the past, time travel, because of regret. Something that they know that they can't change, but they still come back anyway. And what she says is interesting. She goes, they come back because of this regret, and it torments them each day. Let me talk about that torment that I see, that I want you to understand that you need to manage. Regret and remorse can overtake your life, where it can define your actions because of something that you don't want to see happen again, something that may have happened to you, perhaps your upbringing that you're like, oh, I'm not going to let this happen to me, and then you end up overcompensating so much. But guess what happens? You're not living in the present moment. You're not being grounded. Practice of mindfulness. You can't change the past. You also can't let it define your future actions, and then you can't predict the future, so you can control the here and now. Let me give you an example perhaps of this. Someone might have grown up with a lot of financial stress, where constantly he or she witnessed their parents working so hard they weren't around for them because of that financial stress and strain that they were under. So they grew up going, you know what? Regretting a little bit about that upbringing, saying, I am not going to raise my kids like that. They're going to be raised with tremendous amount of wealth or anything that they want. So this person works their butt off their whole life. But here's where regret comes in. They let that regret of the past define them, their future actions, and then they weren't there for their kids because this person was so busy working and choosing to give the best to their kids. But the regret that I see later in life is, oh my gosh, I was working so hard, I didn't spend any time with my kids. So I ended up actually perpetuating a different experience. Sure, they had all the financial stability that I might have not had, but they didn't have me, my time. That is what I tend to see. I will tell you, I've never heard someone say, oh, I regret spending too much time with my family or loved ones. No, What you tend to see is regret that can turn into remorse, that distressful emotion of time not well spent, or experiences that happened in the past that they let define their actions so much, it almost blinds you. So let me talk about what you can do about this. There is what I call a dialectical behavioral skill called non-judgmental, and I like this. This I would say is an advanced skill because we're very judgy, not just in our culture, but judgy in general, right? We're judgy on ourselves. So what I'm talking about being non-judgmental comes first to self-compassion. And when you have this regret, and you don't hear me saying, hey, get rid of that regret. Sometimes that happens in your life and you do have regret, but how can you live with it, right? Manage it so it doesn't turn into remorse. Oh, living with remorse is super tough and I don't recommend it, okay? So I want you to be able to manage that remorse. Here's what I say, non-judgmental skill, a dialectical behavioral skill. It's about not putting value on yourself and others. Value like, I'm terrible, I'm an idiot, I'm so stupid, right? Or I'm a terrible parent, I'm a terrible friend, I can't do anything right. Judgments. I know it can't be helped, but let's reframe that into descriptions so they're non-judgmental. Description meaning understanding what you're really experiencing, the feelings that may be coming up for you, instead of putting a label on it. Does that make sense? Or a value of good and bad. Instead of putting good and bad value on yourself and to others, how can you describe the context? Example, I'm an idiot. Here's a description. I make mistakes, but I'm trying. Or, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible parent. I don't have all the answers to parenting. That's a description. So instead of putting a value, a judgment, turn it into a description starting with I. So then you can get a sense of what's going on. So the same thing with pointing to others. You are an idiot, or my colleagues are terrible to work with, and judging them. And oh my gosh, my manager, can't believe this is what he does to me. Turn it into a description. I'm angry. I'm upset, I'm disappointed because my team doesn't realize how hard I'm working. I'm upset with my parents because they don't understand me at times. They don't really ask about what I'm doing in my life. I see that because you can get very judgy, like I hate my family. I can't stand talking to my parents. I need you to put that into a description of, wow, I get hurt every time I talk to my parents because I can't express my emotions. Description. So I hope you're kind of sticking with me here. This is how you can manage your regret so it doesn't turn into remorse. Now let me talk about what Vincenzo says to the female protagonist when he says parents or kids' criticism of their parents turn into regrets, because life is too short, right? Things happen that you don't predict. And so that's why I'm saying be mindful of your relationships, emotional investments. I say this a lot. It's about the family system, understanding that you're one emotional unit, a family, the greater system like your job. I talked about the non-judgmental skill and how you can manage through your regret. It's also understanding negative self-talk, right? And instead of that, reversing that to empowerment talk, looking at strengths that you have, not what the weaknesses are. You focus on that, it'll consume you, and then your regret basically dictates how you're gonna do everything in your life. That example of what I talked about of financial stability and then this person working their butt off and then not spending any time with the family, and that's the regret this person has. I see that often. Another example is you grew up with tiger parents and you're like, I am not gonna do this, because you regret that upbringing, and you're like, so I'm gonna make sure when I parent, I'm the exact opposite. And you do, but the exact opposite is maybe too dismissive, permissive, perhaps, and then you find yourself not being able to have any say in your kids' lives. They dismiss you completely because they're like, well, you gave me all this control and power, and the regret you have is, oh my gosh, I don't have any control of my kids' lives or any modeling of behavior or any influence. And that is sad too, and I see that in a lot of families today. Those are two examples, but there are many. Maybe you have a regret of something you said, something you did, or an experience that happened to you that could have been traumatic. Sure, that can definitely lead to remorse, and we can't help some of the events that happen in your life. But I do not want your past to define you. You can break, you can unlearn those regretful actions. It takes time, so that non-judgmental skill that I introduced to you is one example. And of course, breathing. I think I've talked about deep breathing before, but never really outlined it, and I talk about it a lot in my workshops. Do you know that deep breathing, the purpose? Oxygen to your brain. So when you're in distress, perhaps feeling that shame, the remorse because of regret of the past, Take some deep breaths. Specifically, you can practice square breathing where you inhale, count to 4, hold your breath, count to 4, and then exhale, count to 4 times. It's a 48-second exercise. Get that oxygen flowing to your brain so that you can think and go, okay, you know, I can't let this define me, and completely rule the actions of my present day. Because then you're allowing the past to dictate your future. I hope I'm making sense. And Sisyphus, when she says people come back from the future to the past, knowing they can't change it, that is how powerful regret is. But again, you can't let that dictate. So things happen. Please show some self-compassion that you know that you're not perfect. Instead of putting a judgment on you and others and judging what you do and what others do, describe it, saying, I make mistakes, I'm not perfect, I am trying, or I want to try, or I'm learning about parenting. I also realize that I have learned some tiger parenting tendencies from my past, but I do want to unlearn them. That's a description. Instead of saying, yeah, I'm a tiger parent, because that's how I grew up, and so I'm going to tiger parent you this. That's not effective. So learning from those 2 episodes, Vincenzo, episode 3, and Sisyphus, episode 4, great examples of regret. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to Noonchi, and you can hit the little bell button, which will give you an alert when I have new videos every week.